This is Tracy Broussard with RoadDawg.online.com and the legendary Roy Burns with Aquarian Drumheads.
Well, the tours that I did with Benny's band and Lionel Hampton's band were by bus.
No satellite,
Oh,
no DVD.
No, no.
That's when you really got to know a guy, right? You or guys in your band.
Well, you got to know each other pretty well. I think what I remember most was New York City at the time I got there in the late 50s. It was a hotbed of drummers. You could go out to 6 or 7 nightclubs any night of the week for very little money and see Buddy Rich, Louis Bellson, Max Roach, Art Blakey, Philly Joe Jones, Joe Morello. I mean, all these great drummers are working all the time. There were 2 or 3 great guys in town every night.
That must have been amazing.
Oh, you just went from one club to the next, and it was like taking a free music lesson. I mean, it costed $2 or $3 to get in. You could stay for as long as you wanted, buy a couple of beers, and you couldn't go to a better university than seeing those guys play in person up close. Not like a concert.
Right.
You could be sitting 10 feet
Just
from
a small room, right?
Right, just clubs. You'd be sitting 10 feet from the drum set. And you could feel what was happening. I remember seeing Count Basie at Birdland. It's like you were in the band. The sound surrounded you. And, seeing a DVD or a video or something of great players like Buddy or the Count Basie Orchestra or somebody like that, you didn't get the same impact that you did sitting 10 feet from the bandstand. I mean, it's great that we have the record of those players, but I think that was the most interesting period of my life in terms of drumming. Was there's so many guys in New York that were playing. It was pretty hard to get too big-headed because there was great guys in town every night,
Yeah, I can imagine. And would you guys get together, like, on nights off or days off and trade fours or meet somewhere?
Well, one of the funniest stories was when Buddy Rich started his new sextet with Mike Maneri and Sam Mose, the flute player I'd worked with. And he was playing at Birdland, so I went down to see him. And the sextet sounded great. I thought one of Buddy's best groups. So the next day I met Henry Adlers, who was a friend of Buddy's from childhood. And I was waiting to give some guy a drum lesson. And these 3 or 4 guys were standing around and said, "Did you hear Buddy Rich last night?" I said, "Yeah, I heard." He said, "Wasn't that terrible?" I said, "Yeah, old-fashioned boom, boom, boom on the bass drum. Can't swing a leg. Worst drumming I ever heard. Loud, bad taste, unmusical." I'm thinking, did they hear the same group I heard? I couldn't believe it. Then Buddy walked in. The same guy said, "Hey, Buddy, man, you sounded great last night, man. You were really smoking."
No.
So I realized, I said, everybody's brave till the man's in the room. And drummers will talk, It's like the joke about the guy that graduated from Berkeley. And he had got an A in every course. He couldn't get a job. So a friend of his in Germany said, "Come on over here. I've got a lot of contacts. I can get you some work in Europe." So he gets him to do a film score for a video. He starts writing charts with a big band out of Belgium. He sings on a record, gets a hit record, comes back to Boston 2 years later and runs into an old friend of his. The guy says, "Where you been?" He said, "Well, I've been in Europe. Didn't you hear about it?" He said, "No, I didn't hear anything." "Oh," he said, "Well, I had a hit record. I sang, so I didn't hear anything about that." He said, "Well, what about the musical score I did for the film and things like that?" He says, "No, I didn't hear anything." So what have you been doing since you've been back? He said, "Well, I went down and sat in with Joe Price's big band last night, and I was a little rusty. I really didn't play too well." He says, "Oh, I heard about that."
Oh, yeah. So
It's a negative. Everybody hears about it, But I think generally there was a real camaraderie amongst the drummers. There wasn't too much of that.
That must have been just amazing too. Did you feel like when you saw guys like Buddy Rich or Louis Bellson play that you knew that these guys are just going to blow up? Did you have that feeling? And you yourself, I mean, what was your feeling about it? Did you feel like you could just take on the world? Did you feel like you had something?
Well, I felt I could do it, given enough effort. I did pretty well. I played with most of my heroes.
Oh, yeah.
Which was great. I caught the tail end of the big band era. I did a lot of studio work.
You played on Sing Sing Sing, right?
Yeah.
I played that song, countless times in high school and stuff, and to think that I'm sitting here with you, and you play on that. And you probably hear that in the most random places, don't you?
What you hear on television, they reissued the recording I did about 10 different times. What happened was, Westinghouse was one of the sponsors of that tour. So the Benny Goodman album, one of the 3 albums that we did at the World's Fair, was available through Westinghouse for $1. And my Sing 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 solo was on that record. The other 2 albums on Columbia didn't go anywhere. But the one for $1, it was cheap, sold like crazy.
Yeah.
So that's actually what got my name out there. I was very fortunate. And sometimes it's good to be in the right place at the right time.